Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and brought to you by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and DataFax. This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are giving back and making a difference so we can learn and do the same. We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose. Now here's our host, the CEO of City Current, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current, brought to you by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and DataFax. We're here with a global change maker when you look at innovation, changing the face, when you talk about the way the world treats and prevents cancer, childhood cancer. We are with a change maker indeed. He is the president and CEO of ALSAC, which is the fundraising and awareness arm for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, based and headquartered right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Rick Shadyac, our good friend. Rick, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing awesome, Jeremy. It's always great to be with you. You're a little kind in that upfront there, so we'll hopefully not disappoint the audience here with the global change maker piece, but we'll give it a shot.
Hey, you are definitely a global change maker. There is no question about that. When you look at St. Jude and just the brand, the recognition, I mean, phenomenal, global, but also too, obviously, for Memphis, a huge part of the heartbeat of this city. And we'll talk all about that in a second. But the fun of the ChangeMakers podcast is we have a chance to talk about your personal story as well as your professional story. So let's start with your personal story. Give us a little bit of just your childhood in terms of where you grew up. And you obviously are family tied to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So there's a huge family legacy here. But give us a little bit of your personal storyline growing up.
Happy to. So first of all, I'll start by saying I'm proud to be a Memphian. But I was born in Washington, D.C. So I'm actually one of those rare birds that was born in Washington, D.C. Ultimately, my family moved to Northern Virginia, and I grew up in Northern Virginia in the Arlington and Falls Church areas, and literally spent my entire life there with the exception of college and law school until I took this position here at ALSAC and St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So I really am a product of Washington, D.C., and I think that experience there in Washington helped to shape me and mold me into the kind of person that I am today. You know, DC is all about government and politics. It's also an incredibly diverse community. And you know, growing up, and I'll age myself here for your audience, but, you know, growing up in the 60s and the 70s was a really interesting time in Washington, D.C. So, you know, in the throes of the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, and all the things that, you know, the protests and demonstrations that went on, you know, I recall vividly, and one of the things I tell my team members all the time, I was born on April 4, which is the day that Dr. King was assassinated. And you know, I didn't really know a lot about Dr. King, but it was my 11th birthday when he was assassinated. And I wanted to know who his man was that was interrupting my birthday. Okay, that's how selfish I was, because I didn't quite get it at 11 years old, you know, to be perfectly honest. But it's become a lifelong passion of mine because I've just been so deeply moved by what Dr. King did. But I also got to watch our city burn, okay, because there were riots and demonstrations, and had a family member that was pretty seriously injured because he was a restaurant in the city and got shot. So a lot of those things, those experiences shaped me. It was a blessing to grow up in D.C. And, you know, one of the coolest parts about my upbringing was my exposure to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So it's ironic that the organization that I have the privilege of leading, ALSAC, which is American Lebanese Syrian Associated Charities, was born in 1957. I was born in 1957. So same year as the organization that I lead was born. And, you know, my dad was involved from the very beginning. So I know my brother and I would both tell you that, you know, some of the most memorable times that we would have would be when Dad would come back from a trip to St. Jude, and he'd tell us about his experience here and about some patients that he met. And, you know, it's literally like talking about kids either in your neighborhood or family friends.
Right.
Or that some of them would call my mom and my dad. And it was just really, really heartwarming. And, you know, my brother and I didn't get it at first because we were kind of wondering why my parents were so deeply moved. But as we kind of grew up and grew a little bit older, we understood the magnitude of their work and the level of commitment. And I think both Tom and I we're blown away and we're humbled to have been, you know, kids of Dick and Julie Shadyac, who literally helped to create this amazing place.
So let's start there. I want to bounce all over the place because you have so many amazing stories, but tell the story that to me is kind of famous, but of your father and Danny Thomas and how they met, because I think it's an interesting story in terms of just the bowling alley and some of those pieces that helped to literally create St. Jude.
Yeah, so you got to go back. We put this at 57 or 58. My dad used to tell it two different ways, but he was either 27 or 28 years old. He's a Department of Justice lawyer. Dad did not know Danny Thomas, okay? But he got a phone call from Mike Tamer and Danny ultimately said, he's coming to town. We want you guys to meet. They picked a bowling alley in Washington, D.C. They asked my dad to bring a couple of his friends. Back in those days, people who were Lebanese or Syrian kind of hung out in Lebanese and Syrian clubs. So my dad asked his boss at the Department of Justice, Bud Rashid. His name is on this very building where we're doing this podcast right now. And also his best friend, who was a doctor in Washington by the name of Dr. Edward Soma. And so the three of them showed up in this bowling alley. They met Mike Tamer, the other man whose name is on the building. It would be the first CEO of ALSAC, and Danny. And Danny told them that he wanted to build a hospital. He wanted to treat catastrophically ill kids. He thought it was going to be cancer, wanted to put it in Memphis, Tennessee, and he wasn't going to charge. It was going to be open to all kids, regardless of race, creed, religion, or economic circumstance. And, and think about this, guys. I mean, as we go through this journey, and I talk to my team members about this all the time, no patients, no hospital, no shiny or glossy marketing materials, just an idea sketched on the back of a napkin. And these guys bought into it. And Dad said he basically asked, Danny, said, why are we going to do this? And Danny looked at him and said, we're doing this to say thank you to God and the United States of America for giving their parents, my grandparents, the opportunity to come to the United States and to make life. So it was our collective thank you of Lebanese and Syrian people to the United States of America. And Jeremy, I say this all the time, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. This is the Arab American community's greatest contribution, not just to the United States, but to the world. That's what St. Jude is.
See, I told you you're a global change maker.
Well, there you go. I don't know about that, but pretty cool stuff.
Well, I mean, it's creating global change. There's no doubt about it. And a global buy-in, too. So let's bounce back. So you mentioned Tom, your brother. Yeah. Talk about Tom Shadyac. I mean, there's so much, and he'll be his own podcast at some point here in the future. But give us a little bit of just, how you describe your brother.
My brother is crazy smart and just plain old crazy. How about that? So, look, I mean, I knew growing up that my brother was going to be something special. He was creative, and we're only a year and a half apart, first of all, okay? And even though my dad ultimately did pretty well as a lawyer, we grew up in the same bedroom, even though we had a house where there were multiple other bedrooms. So we were pretty tight, but, we also, we got on each other a little bit, and we were both athletes and kind of super competitive, but it was obvious when, by high school time, it was pretty clear that Tom was going to be something creative because he would always gravitate toward writing the skits for the school, what you name it, whether it's a pep rally or whatever the heck we were doing that particular day in high school. And he actually used to do the joke of the day at school, and he just was a total jokester. And then, he went on to college and did some pretty special stuff at UVA, creating his own poster company that bailed his fraternity out of all sorts of debt, but more importantly, to pay for his partying bills. So I mean, it was pretty obvious that he was going to go on to do something pretty cool. It was interesting, too, always because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, okay? My dad was a lawyer, so it was kind of assumed that Tom was going to be a lawyer, too, but I was like, there's no way this dude is going to be a lawyer, okay? He's just, way too creative, okay? So, my dad would always go, well, you're going to go to law school, Tom, right? And Tom goes, we'll see. So
right.
He gets out of school, and I'll let him tell you about this little blip on the radar that he had in terms of not graduating on time. He might have been one credit short. And imagine, he goes, Rick, you got to tell Dad. Okay?
See, this is good dirt that we're getting on Tom.
I'm getting Tom right now.
Yeah, that's good.
He called me up one day and he goes, hey, would you do me a favor? Will you tell Mom and Dad I'm one credit short of graduating? And of course, at that point, they've made all the plans. We got graduation parties.
Right.
And I go, dude, how could you have been one credit short? He goes, I didn't really pay attention to those. I guess you have to have a certain number of hours to graduate. I was like, duh, Tom, okay, it's not real hard. So anyway, we ultimately told him. But the cool part of that story is, so Tom had to go back to UVA for another semester. That was when he took his first film class. So I think that was divine intervention in all honesty.
Yes.
And that's when he found his true passion. And then, of course, right after he took that class and he graduated, he broke the news to Dad, I'm going to L.A. and I'm going to go be a joke writer, Bob Hope. And my dad was like, yeah, I'll be supporting you for a long time. And he did support him for a long time, or helped support him for a long time. But then obviously his career took off within a couple of years. So
yeah, for those who don't know, we're talking about Tom Shadyac, who's the writer, director, producer. You talk about Bruce Almighty, Liar, Liar, Ace Ventura, Patch Adams, all these amazing movies, iconic movies. That Tom Shadyac. So yes, I Am, the documentary, Life's Operating Manual 2.0. We could go on and on and on. That'll be another podcast. Give us, though, one fun family tradition or something that when you think about, sharing the room with Tom and just your family and that dynamic, what's one family tradition that puts a smile on your face?
I would have to say it would be family dinners. I mean, my mom and dad were pretty intentional about us, eating together and kind of getting quizzed about the events of the day and things like that. So it was always that. And then we kind of expanded it out on Sundays and always had additional family members over. And so it was that. And I back in those days, you kind of, it was like, it's kind of a pain, but now I look back on it and say, those are really, really special times for us. And just to be able to have that intimacy. And I sadly think, Jeremy, that we've kind of lost those moments and those opportunities, because they are special times when you can really, as a family, kind of bond and just talk about the events of the day and share some of the thoughts and emotions that we all experience over the course of a day.
Absolutely. What's one either a bit of advice or a quote or something? I'm going to kind of duel this because I think it's fun. But from Tom, what's something you've learned from Tom?
I would say that with Tom, it was the fact that he pushed back to my parents, and he knew he had to find happiness in a different way than maybe I found happiness. So I would just tell you, always pursue your passions. You're going to work for the rest of your life, so you might as well enjoy your work. So don't settle. Every person that's listening to this podcast today, you should pursue your passion, okay? And don't compromise, because ultimately you're going to find something that inspires you. I like to look at life this way. If I look forward to going to work every single day, it's really not work. But then I also want to look forward to going home. Okay, so if you could develop that kind of an integration where you're looking forward to it, you get enjoyment and satisfaction and fulfillment from your job, but then you're also excited to go home, I think you got the right integration in your life, and you're going to lead I think, a full and satisfying life.
And let's flip that over to what's something you've learned from your parents?
The importance of giving back. I mean, I don't even have to hesitate on that. I think about the chances and risks that my father and mother took. Let's say Dad was 28 years old, and he's, being presented to by D. Thomas about building this hospital in a city 1,000 miles away that, he knew nothing about, that it was a segregated city, that they were going to do all these things. And he said yes. And then said not only yes, but I'm going to make this my life's work too. And then just to see the satisfaction that he derived. I mean, Jeremy, I'll always, probably the most, Tom would tell you this too, I think. I think one of the most telling things for Tom and I was when we attended my dad's retirement party here in Memphis, St. Jude. It was at the convention center. It's about 1,000 people, and have all these people come up to me and Tom, and we knew what he did, but we didn't really know what he did.
Sure.
Okay. And have all these people come up to us and say, thank you for sharing your dad with us. Thank you for sharing your dad with us. Your dad was like us having a grandfather or another father while we were on this cancer journey. You don't know what your father did for me and my kid. I mean, it was so deeply moving, and there were so many families there. And that's when I knew just how special his contribution was to this place. And now I have the privilege of kind of carrying it every single day and trying to create my own legacy. But I'll never forget that day. I never forget that day.
I think, it's a really special storyline. So talk about your path to coming in and to your point too, from the standpoint of now this really is a family legacy and you have a lot to live up to with your father, but then to your point, to be able to carve your own pathway with it. So there's a lot of nuances to this, but talk about your path to ALSAC St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Yeah, it's an interesting path. So I'm a lawyer by training and practiced law for 27 years in Washington, D.C. And I started getting involved with St. Jude after I graduated from law school. I was back in the Washington, D.C. area. And so I started running some events in D.C. I had my own golf tournament there that would benefit St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And then I would help and support the local office and things like that. So I got a little bit older. They asked me to go on what we call our national committee. And because I was a lawyer, I was on the legal committee of the board. And I would start attending meetings periodically. And I started enjoying it. So I would travel here with some frequency. And then, my dad became the CEO right when I was actually first put on the board back in the 1990s. And I got a little uncomfortable with the idea that I would be on a board that my father was the CEO reporting to. I thought that was a little awkward. So I said, you know what, I'll stay involved with the charity, but I don't think I should be on the board. I don't want to be here in these meetings. And even if I step out, I don't want to constrain anybody from saying, what's he doing? Why is he doing this? I just didn't feel comfortable about that. But then after, I forget, 7 or 8 years after Dad kind of cemented his legacy here, because God, he had such a legacy anyway, people asked me back on. They said, we need you come on, okay? So I came back on. And, then I ultimately, within a few years, became the chairman of the board and so gravitated to a higher position. And that was right after my dad had retired. And then ultimately, we had an opening here. And I was running the search because I was chairman of the board, okay? And some people started saying, would you consider putting your name in the hat for the CEO position? And look, I still had kids at college, and I was doing pretty well as a lawyer. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I was doing pretty well as a lawyer. And I still had some pretty hefty college tuition bills. My son went to a private school, and, it was not cheap. So, but ultimately, you prey on these kinds of things, which is exactly what I did. My wife and I and kids got together and said, I think I might want to throw my hat in the ring here, but, just so you guys know, we're going to have to move to Memphis. And, that was going to be a big change. Man, my kids were in college. My daughter was just getting ready to graduate, so it wasn't going to affect her as much. But my son was definitely still having a few years of college left, and he was not thrilled about the idea of us selling the family home and, all those kinds of things. It was also in the middle of the Great Recession. So, I had to weigh, do I want to start a brand new career at a time when, man, there were a lot of problems going on right then. But I also said, this is an opportunity for me to be part of the solution, because ALSAC was kind of languishing at that point. And we had been rudderless without a CEO for about 18 months when I think I threw my hat in the ring finally. And, we were struggling in terms of raising money. I've been stuck in about the $600 million range. So I threw my hat in the ring, said I'm going to be part of the solution here if the board wants me.
Sure.
It became a protracted process, but ultimately they settled on me. How about that? Okay, I'm here, and believe it or not, Jeremy, July 1 will be it'll be 10 years that I've been.
That's
CEO
awesome.
Here. Loving every day of it.
There was no settling there. What was it like to work with your dad? I mean, in that regard.
Well, look, it was humbling, first of all, to just fully appreciate the legacy that he had here and to see the impact. And I hear it still today. I'll see a family that'll come to me with kids that are now grown. I'm talking in their 20s or their 30s. And I knew your father. We were a patient family here when your father was CEO. Let me tell you what he did for them. Or to hear the stories of some of the nurses that have been here for 30 years to say what my father did for them or the impact that they had, he had on them. So, it's really pretty cool. I mean, before when I was in the other building, I sat in the same office that he sat in, sat at the same desk that he sat in when I first got here. I live in Harbortown, so I would go by a street that's named after him.
Right.
I look out at a building that's named after him. So I'm like, wow, I got a lot to do here. I got some big shoes to fill here. But it was cool, and I knew that ultimately I would try to create my own legacy here, and I hope that I've made somewhat of an impact here as well. But it was really humbling to see what my parents did. And I think about it again. If I was at 28, would I have made the same decisions they made? Probably not. Because today I'd ask them for a business plan and all the questions that we now ask, right?
And that's a great point, is that in many times it's so easy to say no. Yeah. And yet when you look at, especially for all those people who thank your father and you look at that sort of sacrifice, and yet you look back and you think, oh, it's so easy to say yes. No, it wasn't. And you look at what they then created and the amount of sacrifice and time and effort and energy to then create this, it really was a very big decision. And when you look at, obviously, the monumental change that's been created, that was a pivotal moment in history then to say yes. So something that most of us would take for granted, but a simple yes created all of this.
And they had multiple opportunities to bail. And that's, people don't ever know about that part of our story. So they raised enough money to build this place, okay? By the skin of their teeth, they raised enough money to build this place. But what they hadn't thought through was how they were going to pay for all the operating expenses, okay? So they opened the doors, and then they had to continue to fundraise, and ALSAC was not being successful, okay? It was making a little bit of money, but the expenses were way more than they had projected, okay? So at that point, a lot of people would have bailed, right? Instead, now my father wasn't one of those guys because he didn't have any money at that point. He was always one of the youngest people that had gotten on board with this. But some of the ones that did have some means, they personally paid the bills.
Wow.
Personally. So make sure that those doctors got paid. And then remember, our beginnings are so humble. We used the nuns here in Memphis as our first set of nurses. Okay, and some of them even lived right here. So we were kind of go by the seat of our pants, and those guys could have said, "Well, man, we're way over our skis here." But instead, they hung in there. ALSAC turned the corner, started raising enough money to support St. Jude, and then the rest is kind of history. But I think about that all the time, especially when I think that my dad was in his 20s when he made that commitment. And some of these other guys were probably in their mid-30s and were just starting out in their careers. They were just starting their families. So their financial obligations were really kicking in at that point.
Well, and you think, your promise is your handshake, your word, that's your reputation. And you think that, to your point, especially nowadays where in many cases, sadly, that's gone away, that commitment to say, no, I'm in this all the way through, I'm not giving up, that says a lot about the character of your father, but also your family.
I think about the 60s too. My friend, opened the doors in 62. And then, several of these people will tell you that when King got assassinated and they were coming all the time to the city, there was a real question: should they keep on coming to the city? Most of these guys they're Arab Americans, which means we're white, right? Okay, so were they going to still be welcomed in the city because they had opened up integrated hospital in the South, right? And we, some of the things that we did with hospitality, how we helped integrate the hospitality industry. But again, they were like, we're going to be part of the solution here, man. We're not going to run from this. Let's hit it head on, and we're the example. We were doing all this at the very same time the civil rights movement is going on. So we're going to be part of the solution. That's what I loved about that first generation. They got it. They were brave, they were courageous, they were visionary, and they stuck with it.
Talk about that side of it with the integration. I think that's another side of this that flies under the radar, is the fact that Danny Thomas, your father, that group really was instrumental in integrating hotels. When you look at even the construction of the hospital, that's a piece of this too. So talk about that diversity and inclusion and really how St. Jude was at the forefront of that.
No, that's right. And Dr. Pinkel, the first CEO of St. Jude, was so instrumental in all of this. So, that vision from day one was going to be that we were going to welcome all kids. And it was an intentional decision to put this in Memphis, Tennessee, because Danny Thomas could have put this anywhere, but he wanted to put it in Memphis, Tennessee, because he wanted to make sure that all kids, regardless of their race or economic circumstance, had access to quality specialty healthcare. That's what this was all about. So we opened the doors, but back in those days, we didn't have any housing facilities. So, we had to find places for people to stay because obviously our patient base is not just local. So we went to hotels. And sadly, in those days, the hotels were segregated. But we insisted that if they were going to take our Caucasian patients, that they were going to take our African American families and Hispanic families. And ultimately, they capitulated. They tried to say that, we'll let them sleep in the hotel, but they can't eat in the same dining rooms with Caucasians. And they said, you don't get it. We do everything together. And so ultimately they capitulated because they wanted the business. And that led ultimately to the integration of the hospitality industry. But even in the design of the hospital, Danny Thomas intentionally used an African-American architect. And he had to do his drawings of the hospital upside down because an African-American wasn't allowed to sit side by side with many white people. White people didn't want to sit side by side with an African-American. Wow. He was so talented and gifted, he learned to draw upside down. Okay, they insisted that we were going to have fully integrated bathrooms. That didn't exist. All these things that people would take for granted today, that didn't exist back then. They had separate water fountains, but not here. So just groundbreaking stuff. That's 1962, and those plans are being developed in the 50s. Okay, this was unheard of in the South. So again, I just think of how visionary that was, how courageous that was. They were real leaders, man. They, in an era today where I think there's a dearth of leadership, man, what shining examples. We need more of them today.
Well, and the fact that everyone would eat together too.
Yeah, absolutely.
He didn't want doctors separated from patients, everyone together.
100% correct. That was his motto. He wanted the doctors and the scientists to eat with the cafeteria workers, our environmental people here that keep our campus pristine, and all the patients and the families, wherever they came from. It was just beautiful. It still is beautiful.
Absolutely. Well, it's a beautiful campus. We're here right now.
Yeah, we are.
Share with us the numbers when you talk about how much it takes, how much you have to raise. I mean, you mentioned kind of the humble beginnings, but where are you today in terms of how much you have to raise every day and per year to keep this mission alive?
Yeah, so the hospital budget is more than $1 billion. That's with a B this year. And on top of that, we've got capital. And, we look out the window here of where we are, and there's a $412 million research tower coming out of the ground. So 75 to 80% of that money has to be raised from the public. So ALSAC historically now regularly has to raise more than $1 billion. We're blessed to be considerably above $1 billion now, but we do it in very small increments. And I'm very proud to say that we are basically Middle America's charity. Our average donation here is $43. We are blessed, and I mean truly blessed, to have over 11 million donors. We're fortunate to have over 1 million volunteers. So it just takes this mass of people coming together, uniting under this big umbrella, this big tent that we have here, because I think everybody kind of gravitates to the purity of this mission that is St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Thank you for listening to our ChangeMakers podcast. City Current is a catalyst of over 100 partners joining forces and funds to power the good through free events, positive media, and philanthropy. If you like our efforts and you're looking to power the good with us, follow us on social media at City Current and check out our website at citycurrent.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen. And if you know a changemaker, please reach out and let us know so we can consider them for a future show. The ChangeMakers podcast is brought to you by DataFax. DataFax is a national provider of trusted background screening products such as criminal searches, drug screening, employment and education verifications, and post-hire monitoring to employers of all sizes. DataFax is one of the few background screeners that holds the stringent National Association of Professional Background Screeners accreditation. They're certified by the WBENC as a 100% woman-owned business, and in 2018, they were ranked by HRO Today's Baker's Dozen customer satisfaction ratings as one of the top background screeners in the nation. You are in good hands with DataFax. Visit datafax.com to learn more and make sure to mention the ChangeMakers podcast. And now, back to the show. Absolutely. So talk about progress. Even recently, big news. But when you talk about changing the way the world thinks, but also treats and defeats childhood cancer, huge progress. Obviously, still a lot to be made, which is what we're doing every single day here on campus. But talk about the progress and where we are today with the cancer.
So think about it this way. So back when we opened our doors in 1962, 4 out of 5 kids that were going to be diagnosed with cancer would die. So the survival rates were 20% for across the board for cancer. Fast forward today, 50 plus years, and the survival rates are the opposite. 4 in 5 kids are going to survive. So only 1 in 5 will pass away. Still the leading cause of death by disease in U.S. kids today. Okay, leukemia was a 4% survival rate when we opened our doors to 94% today. So remarkable progress. But here's the next frontier. The next frontier is global. Okay, and we've recently announced a global initiative. So over 400,000 kids are going to get cancer around the globe. Just under half of those kids are not even going to get diagnosed or diagnosed accurately. They live in low and middle income countries. They don't have access to quality health care, specialty health care, and survival rates in low and middle income countries are as low as 20, even 10%. Okay, so it's 1962 again, all over the globe. So we seek to reverse that. So Dr. Downing, the CEO of St. Jude, went in front of the United Nations and said, we seek to raise the overall childhood cancer survival rates for the 6 most common forms of childhood cancer around the globe from about 20% to 60% by 2030. Just a audacious goal, but we actually think we can do it because we have a partially solvable problem here in the United States. It is our moral imperative to export what we know in terms of curing cancer, treating cancer, and doing it all around the globe. Here at ALSAC, we're training foundations from all around the globe to raise money, to learn how to market, to use technology better, to create donor management systems so that they can go back to their countries and try to create resources that are going to support these clinics that we've established in those countries. So we got our work cut out for us, but I think we're going to get it. To show you the impact, though, within a couple of months, we had 50 distinct countries on this campus learning how to treat cancer from St. Jude and learning how to fundraise and market from us. And it was so powerful. No other place in the world, other than the United Nations maybe, where 50 countries would come together to try to solve a singular problem, okay? Countries that in day-to-day life don't even talk to each other. I want you to think about that. That takes place right here in Memphis, Tennessee, on our campus, and that's our power. We're able to bring people, disparate people, together to try to find a solution to a problem that plagues the world.
One of the things that's really, to me, puts you head and heels above is this mission to freely share the research. And everything you're talking about is to really not just keep it under wraps, but to share it with the world so that you can move so much quicker with the research and the findings. The other part is, which is fascinating, is you move really fast to be able to protect the research, to license and copyright, whatever the legal term is. You're the lawyer. Yeah. But it's not to protect it in-house. It's to protect it so that you can then freely share it. So I think there's a lot that goes on strategically that's mind-boggling but brilliant in terms of your ability to then create these mechanisms to strategically share, but to move that needle so much faster.
Yeah, perfect example. You're 100% correct. So we protect our intellectual property through technology licensing, okay? So we'll let people use it, but we also, for stuff that isn't going to be protected, from an intellectual property perspective, we will share. So a perfect example is what we did with our pediatric cancer genome project. Mm-hmm. So, we studied across the board the entire spectrum of pediatric cancer. What causes cancer? So what causes a white blood cell to morph into a leukemia? What causes a brain cell to morph into a brain tumor? Where are these mutations occurring in the genetic sequence? Targeting those specific areas, trying to understand what causes these things. Because we know kids get cancer very differently than any of us who are a little bit older than a child, okay? They've made unhealthy lifestyle decisions. They haven't been exposed to environmental things. So it's those kinds of things that are very different in a child. So we made over $100 million commitment to do this pediatric cancer genome project, found out amazing results, that these cancers are all unique, and it has led to personalized medicine, and found out that about 10% of the pediatric cancer population has a predisposition towards cancer. So they've inherited it, okay? So we can monitor those kids and siblings, and so early detection leads to best results. Took all that data, uploaded it to the St. Jude cloud. All you have to do is sign in, okay? Let us know that you're using it. Freely share it with the world so that clinicians all across the globe can better diagnose their patients. That's just a small example of what St. Jude does, and that's what we do every single day.
You and I, we do a lot of tours here where we bring speakers in, and really any chance I have to showcase and spotlight St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, we do. And one of the things I always like to highlight is the fact that Dr. Pui, you had President Clinton come in and talk about, at the time, he did all his research, but was really fascinated with your ability to prove that if a child was treated here at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, that race was not a factor. And a big part of it, and the biggest part of it, really was the fact that you could do anything and everything that was needed because of the way you're set up with the fundraising and the public support. Talk a little bit about that side, because I think it really is groundbreaking, fascinating, but also, too, when you talk about healthcare and the landscape, this really is the model for how things should operate.
That's incredible that you knew that story. So, yes, it happened with President Clinton.
See, I listened to you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I know you listen, but you couldn't remember. So I knew he was a prolific reader. We sent him an iPad in anticipation of his visit here, and he read up on some of these studies. We loaded it with a bunch of scientific studies, and we knew that he was a voracious reader. And we were right. So he got off the elevator and said, I want to meet this Dr. Pui guy. And so we knew that he would want to Dr. Pui. We just had a feeling because he's the world's expert. And he said, Dr. Pui, I read your study. I want to know, why is race not a factor in the survivability of childhood cancer if the child is treated at St. Jude? And Dr. Pui looked at him in kind of his broken English, but in a wonderful way. And he said, it's because of the support of the public. Okay. And he goes, well, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, the support of the public allows us to do whatever we need to do to get a child better. If I need to order a second set of x-rays, I don't care whether or not it's covered by insurance. If I need to use an experimental drug that I know is not going to be covered by insurance, I don't worry about it. If I need to consult with one of my colleagues in China, I'll consult with one of my colleagues in China knowing it's not going to be covered by insurance. We do whatever it takes to get a child better. And we found that when resources are taken out of the equation, race is not a factor in the survivability of childhood cancer if the child is treated at St. Jude. And I'll never forget it. I was standing right next to him. President Clinton looked him in the eye and he said, that's how medicine should be practiced everywhere. And sadly, it's not. But great story. But that's what we do here every day. We want every child, regardless of their economic circumstance, to have the same opportunity to survive childhood cancer. So now as we look at the globe, we say, we don't want where you live to dictate your healthcare outcome. It's the modern day problem that we have to solve because today it's one of the leading determinants of your healthcare outcome is where you live.
Give us one thing, I know that's hard to narrow down, but maybe one or two things that you feel everyone should know about St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, but they might not. I mean, I'm thinking things like even, the flu vaccine and all the stuff that you do here that it really does fly under the radar. But what's one or two things that we should all know that no one might know?
Everybody, well, they may know this, but I can't say it enough. No family will ever receive a bill from St. Jude, not for the cost of treatment, travel, housing, or food, because all we want mom and dad to worry about is helping their child live. And that's just so important. It keeps families together. It allows families to focus on their child, and so many families are ruined financially already. The emotional strain is going to be tough, but families are ruined financially, even if they have to pay a copay. I tell people this example all the time. I mean, the average cost of treatment here at St. Jude is over $440,000. Many of them are way more than that. If you have Cadillac insurance and say if you have a 10% copay, how many people write checks for $44,000, okay? If you have a 20% deductible, that's $88,000. You think about the strain and the drain that's on a family. We take care of all of that, okay? The other thing I would want people to know is once you're a St. Jude family or a patient, you're a family for life here. So we have this really cool life study. And now, thankfully, Jeremy, we've got, thousands of kids that are childhood cancer survivors. So we bring them back and we see how they fare. And we're looking at changing the toxicity of some of the treatments so that these kids have better outcomes and better quality of life. So we're looking at this just so holistically. And to me, that's really one of the beautiful things of our mission. I can name you 10 other things.
And even, to that point, the fact you do take such great care. So for young women who are going through the program to make sure that they're able to have children later in life. And so you have amazing success stories, not only of them getting married and having families. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And just the human element of this, not just the cancer fighting, but the human element to me is just as important, the care and concern for your staff. I want to touch on a few quick things before we kind of get into a lightning round, but talk about commitment to community because you yourself serve on boards, heavily involved in serving the community, leading by example, getting your team out through volunteerism, activation, heavily involved. So not just the good that goes on here, off campus, permeating the community, the Mid-South and beyond.
Well, you're wearing a hat that I love, power the good. Okay. And that's what we want to be too. We want to be power. We want to be energy for the good. And I want to take that off of our campus. And I think those of us that have been blessed with jobs, opportunities, the ability to work in an amazing place like this, in incredible facilities, working toward the best mission on the planet, we have an obligation to give back to our community. And we've taken great sense of pride here at ALSAC and given back to our community, and our employees love it. We had over almost 32,000 community service hours. I guarantee it's really double that because we don't count a lot of the other things that we do. It doesn't count all of our foundations work and things like that we do with all of our global partners and things like that. But I want to give back, and my team members and I work with the most beautiful, kind-hearted, caring, giving people on the planet here at ALSAC and at St. Jude. They want to give back too. And it's so inspiring to me. And, we're a city that has a few challenges. We're a great city, okay? But what I love about this city, this is why it's my hometown now, people want to roll up their sleeves and they want to be part of the solution. I don't like people that all they do is complain about problems, okay? They want to knock the city. Every city's got problems, okay? But at least some of us, and I think the vast majority of us, are hitting it head on, and we want to be part of the solution. We just don't want to complain about it. It's easy to complain. Let's be part of making this place better, and we are, and FedEx is, and AutoZone is, and ServiceMaster is, your company is, Lipscomb Pitts is. We all celebrate trying to do good. That's the beauty of this community.
Amen. So what's, on your end, coming in and setting your own path, give us maybe one example or just one thing that kind of puts a smile on your face when you say this is kind of my part of the legacy, my part of the vision, and kind of where we're headed.
Well, look, I love the work that we're doing globally. It's been a passion of mine all my life, so I would start there. But I also want to say the community, and I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. We have a relationship with Lemoyne Owen. We opened up a call center there. We're changing lives over there by giving kids opportunities and jobs, and several of them have now become full-time employees here. I want to do more of that, and we're going to expand our relationship with Lemoyne Owen. We started this program at the University of Memphis with using students to make some of our call center operations. Many of those kids have gone on to become full-time employees at ALSAC. We're starting a master's degree in philanthropy. We're going to teach the higher level courses at the University of Memphis. My dream, and I know President Rudd's dream, is for this to become a destination program here in Memphis. I want kids, young people from all across the United States and the globe to come to Memphis to learn philanthropy from what I think is the biggest and best charity on the planet, okay? And then to go out and spread all that good all across the country. Okay, that's something that if we can pull this off, and at the same time with St. Jude creating their graduate school, both in global health and also in the PhD program, man, we can really start changing things and making some progress around the world. So I'm excited about that, Jeremy.
Yeah,
we're starting a fellows program too for global people. So we're going to bring people in from all around the globe, and we're going to train them here. They're going to be in Memphis for a year. ALSAC's going to pay for it, and then they got to go back to their country and they got to go do good. Okay. Otherwise, we'll figure out how to get that money back from them. The investments that we made, they will. These are wonderful people, so we want to invest in them.
But this is all the stuff that, to me, I feel like I know a lot about St. Jude, Children's Research Hospital. It's like every time I learn so much more, and it's amazing. Yeah. So let's switch over into a lightning round. It's just short questions, short answers, just a fun chance to kind of wrap up, but to get to know you. So, one, what's a book that you've read recently?
Well, a book that I want everybody to read, because I've read it recently, is Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy, and I'm asking all of my leadership team to go on an incredible journey with me. So they're going to read Just Mercy, and then we're going to go down to Montgomery, Alabama in 10 days, and we're going to go see the National Lynching Memorial and Peace and Justice Museum, Brian's Memorial and Museum down there, and also go across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I'm an advocate about civil rights, and we're on this diversity inclusion journey, so Just Mercy.
Nice. So what is a favorite vacation destination for you and your family?
Well, kind of growing up, we went to the beach all the time. So I would have to say Ocean City, Maryland, but I haven't been there in a couple of decades. So now, I don't have a favorite destination because I just like to travel in different places because I think different experiences actually broaden you. So I'm not going to say Destin, Florida, if that's what you're looking for, okay? I would say pretty much any place I've never been.
That's a good answer. I like that. What is something you like to do to relax?
Right now, I'm nursing a little back injury, but I like to play tennis, and I like to run, and I like to mountain bike.
So what is a TV show or what sports? What do you like to watch on TV?
I love basketball. So I love the Grizzlies. So any kind of basketball. So I'm a basketball fanatic. And I will say that I have a passion for the Washington football team. I will not use their name because I don't like their name, even though I grew up with that name. But I like the Washington football team as well. They're terrible, though.
And they do have a tie to FedEx, too, with the FedEx Field.
Yes, they do.
Talk about on your end, you don't have to name, well, yeah, we'll say, what are some favorite restaurants? We'll give you a plural on this. What are some favorite restaurants that you like to eat at here in Memphis?
Easy. Felicia Suzanne's is number one. Catherine and Mary's, Andy and Michael. Anything Andy and Michael, anything Felicia, Kelly English, normal suspects. But I will also say I like Elwood Shack. I like Central Barbecue. I don't mind going for it a little bit, so all those things.
And you also like Chili's, right?
I do. I do. I love Chili's. I love Domino's.
Yes, and Domino's. Yes, exactly. They're all massive supporters of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Where do you like to eat outside of Memphis?
Well, I go back to D.C. a lot, so I have a lot of favorite restaurants in D.C., and so I could tell you a bunch of them, but I don't.
You can. We have listeners everywhere, so it's fun to kind of live vicariously through you.
I'm going to D.C. on Friday, and my son just turned 30, so he wants to go to Nobu, so we're going to Nobu, and that's not a unique restaurant to D.C., but I like anything kind of with ethnic food, and not that Nobu is a great example of that, but one thing I miss here, I think we could do better in Memphis by getting more ethnic food, so I miss especially Asian food, to be perfectly honest with you.
Hey, my wife tells me all the time, because she'll say, where do you want to eat? And I'm always picking like Asian restaurants, so she's like, can you throw something else in there? So, I agree with you. I like diversity of food for 100%.
Yes.
Talk about on your end either a favorite quote, something that you either go back to often or live by. What's a favorite quote?
Well, look, I could go off of Danny Thomas or Dr. Martin Luther King. And, Danny Thomas said those who work for the good are as those who do the good. So that is something that means a lot to us here at ALSAC. But I love Dr. King's quote of life's most compelling and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Okay. And to me, that's what I always fall back on. What are you going to do for others? And for those of us that have been blessed with good health and opportunity in our life, we have an obligation to do for others. And that's what I'm all about. And that's what I hope and pray that's ultimately my legacy.
Well, that's actually the last question I was going to ask you is, what do you hope your legacy is with this? When you look at you're creating it every single day still, but obviously when we look back many, many years from now, what do you hope your legacy is? So I think you kind of answered that, but would you like to add any more to that?
Well, Jeremy, I hope and pray that I've had the opportunity to touch as many kids' lives as I possibly can, maybe even kids that I'll never even get to meet, and then maybe hope and pray that I've influenced a few of my employees here about maybe a direction in their life when they were questioning things. And I hope and pray that I've made all of my employees, and I mean every one of my employees, a better husband, father, person, human being, because that's what I think an obligation is of a CEO and any leader. It's to make our workforce better people and better employees.
And then the last question is always the easiest is, where do we go to learn more? So website, social media, where would you direct us to get involved, to donate, to be a part of the St. Jude legacy and story?
I just tell you to go to our website. It's stjude.org. It's stjude.org. There's a really cool little /inspire if you want to hit that as well. And you can really read some compelling content. This is new. We've become we have a media publishing platform here now. Really interesting and creative content. We're blessed to be able to hire Lewis Graham, the former editor of the Commercial Appeal, who works here, and he's kind of our editor-in-chief of that content. And it's absolutely brilliant content, and it puts our mission in a very personal perspective.
Well, I told you, listeners, he is a global change maker. St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, ALSAC, global change makers, the whole team. Rick, can't thank you enough for all you do, for coming on this podcast. Greatly appreciate it.
Jerry, if I could say one more thing, thank you for all you do. You are a change maker in this city and around the globe as well. And you inspire me, because I have the opportunity to watch. And as I'm a little bit older than you, so to see a young person have the kind of passion that you have to kind of change the world the way you're changing the world, and you're doing it here in Memphis, and I see it every single day. I say, God bless you. People listen to him. Listen to Jeremy. I'm telling you, Jeremy's got it right.
Well, thank you. Yep. Greatly appreciate it.
It's true, brother.
I'm humbled.
It's true, brother.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by City Current and brought to you by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance and DataFax. To learn more about our guests and to share your stories of others leading by example, visit us online at citycurrent.com and follow us on social media using @CityCurrent. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen. Now, think big, start small, and act now. Be a change maker.